And we're not ready. Interpretation. The app must specify how many and which troops are removed from the branch. Doing the removal solvency, advocates don't check and significant reduction from the reaches. Nearly 80% troop must be permanent in A. And 12. The U.S. began to reduce significantly military presence in Europe. The presidency declined from roughly 250,000 to about 55,000. And that means the plan must explicitly preclude transfer or posture changes. Kentucky Court of Appeals 84. By the word reduce as saturated envisions a vertical scale if a person is transferred to classification and change but not reduced in violation. App just specifies reduction in the airspace of the Persian Gulf and access redeployment voter for ground key links searching for while the presence is reduced and lack specificity makes counterplay competition impossible at the same time making disattling suspect. We should not rely on the goodwill of the 2AC also destroyed pre-round pride claiming troops can be redeployed as cheating. Reduction must be permanent after short meaning the durable beyond makes app conditional through convenient interpretation. Next off plan constantly shift to Asia Pacific and 13. Asia Pacific needs urgent major shift in American foreign policy. The concept has to regard the pivot of the Asia requires that realigning American forces role in the Middle East, realigning military planning and bloodshed to support this. These troops are dependent on the pivot requires the and bolstering Americans job present by realigning the other region because of major defense that's needed to liberate money for domestic investments and home managing Persian Gulf dynamics will necessarily allow for the greater focus in Asia and pivot causes nuclear war with China and East Asian charge rate 11. By securing naval dominance in the South China Sea, the Obama administration aims to acquire 21st century the energy equivalent nuclear background. There's ample evidence the Chinese are deeply worried about the risk of nuclear question. The Chinese leadership will take steps to ensure the safety of the Chinese energy allies. No weakness. They will be military nation to significantly build up Chinese Navy. It will be seen all into inevitable cultural military conflict between China and Russia. Washington could be sparking the Cold War style arms race in Asia. All this likely to lead to heightened risk of inadvertent escalation. Usually, trying to put the most emphasis on military domination and provocation is responsible kind of nuclear war in Asia could endanger the planet. And next off the counterplan text, the United States should significantly increase its military coordination with the airspace of the Persian Gulf and military presence in airspace of the Persian Gulf, including synchronized deployments of pooled base access and training and joint exercise and propose multilateral policy coordination with the United States, the airspace of the Persian Gulf and the Islamic Republic of Iran, including against the Islamic State, and propose the creation of a new multilateral regional security forum, including the airspace of the Persian Gulf and the Islamic Republic of Iran. The counterplan intervenes in the security dilemma and integrates Iran to the regional security order and removes the need for withdrawal. Hearing 1014. At the heart of the dilemma, classification and new windows being opened and resolving the new order could be improved relation or rolling back around and integrating the country is not about the U.S. should foster integration with the regional structure while imposing costs of the opening a new multilateral framework could be a tool to broader strategy and innovation approach to the level of dialogue between Gulf and Iran could be important. First step in reducing tensions could expand to the more regularized dialogue and the new security forum should be an integral element of rule-based security order and the counterplan cells ISIS CEDA 14. ISIS presents a new unique opportunity to receive the Middle East equation out of the Cold War and forget a new relationship, force a new relationship with Iran. Iran could be constructed as a stakeholder. Iran has already signaled the willingness to cooperate in ISIS across the decision of facility Malaki to remove the signals leadership and a willingness to operate in a regional country. The U.S. in search of the political solution is held in high esteem with the Saudi King. His visit signal Iran's desire to the push order approachment and advocate secretary and the play viewing ISIS as an opportunity. The U.S. can help it on becoming constructed and weakening the potential for the actors to deploy next off the app religious crisis politics that are rooted in the masculine desire to protect the public to inform. What is interesting about classified in public discourse now, but argues the U.S. is too masculine, but the U.S. is far too feminine, thus work to become more masculine over safety affairs forms of the crisis right already delivered in public reconstruction of national identity. The discourse of the socially masculine and paternalistic, the project of the patriarchy, the constantly publicly linking multiple subgroups in a way that feminize and general populations with the vulnerabilities in nation to heighten that is a recourse to the strong, decisive, and punitive action and concept of feminine here, vulnerability, American race, right from the narratives, masculine heroism, the discourse of pulse of the far more precisely feminine, for the ground of the cultural imaginary, the scene of form of masculine powers, the Americans of the song with the deliver swift and terrible justice and the gender dictation to say makes warfare inevitable and sustains patriarchy shall bring on. And also the influence of the gender remains marginal and famous organs real rationalities that partiality the stereotypical masculine view the state system making it ignores the emotion the shift of the state's interest and the far from unitary the boundaries between inside and outside order and hierarchy the gender both the gender construction the self and the other predators and heads erotic construction of masculinity the failure to understand the gender less with the power to adjudicate these conflicts and interest and mainstream the appearance of the state unity state military and the more evident they say no more decision no more gender construction state military and gender neutral natural law and automatically impossible to understand the state military conceptualizing the gender is impossible to understand more than understanding state military and feminist culture right to say use gender metaphors in their nationalistic context of the gender icons from state identities and the influence of their interaction and even purpose to make more 20 years of feminist and also make a strong case for the colonization gender both for the better and also the global politics and theories of the constant war of the women deserve the right the cause of the gender is a key part of the house states foreign political community to cheerleader and determine the political interest we pray forward that the rising will reference to gender appears to be problematic. The alternative is an ontological revisionism the deconstruct the myth of the masculine western subject the youngs and four. Feminism requires ontological revision and recognition that necessarily go beyond the appearance of the statement how the undifferent creation and gender, the power construction, social relationship, the position continue to sufficient appears the epistemological limitation will continue to reproduce and got the card and reproduce and they terror advantage U.S. led campaign is turning the tide against ISIS all of N312. ISIS is losing by the ISIS bringing the caliphate has given the supplements and face target the territorial controls and robbing and attack the Iraqi forces of war by U.S. Air Force, Iraq and major cities have been reclaimed and Turkey and Ramadi discovered ISIS Iraqi territorial down for the percent only 17% security ISIS continue to use territorial 20% reduction ISIS strategy as the vulnerable air power the conventional army so U.S. strategy demonstrating the effectiveness of liberation also has no doubt in the coalition strategy is working. Lynch 15 coalition activists have taken a physical toll on ISIS and an assessment to confront the ISIS also must percent of territory coordination military activities of course in Syria to put ISIS under scrutiny. It seems most fair to conclude the U.S. strategy in the counter the lure of ISIS working to help put ISIS leadership under duress and constant more protection. It seems pertinent to conclude the U.S. and the wider coalition military role in discarding the claims that ISIS are working in the attacks of ISIS leadership to destroy its most rapacious growth and no regional feeling. Document 15. Upon the operations of premise of the U.S. hold back to others separately, we have learned the untruth and the assumption that the Sunni Arabs said don't have to say that ISIS were the outside materials were outside not impressed with the White House and refused to get the skin and they look up population only rallied ISIS is the Peter wanted to action is the U.S. and wholeheartedly campaign is not possible and zero risk of the impact more 14. Export security materials and constitute weapons scenarios that have also aggressors are difficult ISIS the carrier that they would need to transport the materials to the target area the shielding would be regarded as shipping out of the pretty active the U.S. would require complex and need to defeat the post of the detection system. These systems are effective detection high level source of the current radiation detection systems will be effective in deterring the system to use actual damage of potential for the attacks to do a relatively low causalities would be less and also resulting from the air traffic accident and probably a high end causality remains and Iran. Gold military presence is the only way to deter Iran and making a nuclear data success. Polican 15. Iran is not quite aware of the American power when the U.S. exerts itself the Iranians retrieved the absence of American engagement in the leadership of the military involvement in the region GCC to take our fighting understands the deal. I don't understand themselves when they start tracking the example the U.S. has been able to disengage from the region absent the strong American role around GCC the default mode is to attack on their own and only makes the situation where there's only one in the U.S. that are going to rescue reassure the Gulf states to demonstrate that around the U.S. is neither abandoned the region nor too favorable to walk aggressive activities GCPOA is a picture living in the Middle East of the safer place that won't happen in the U.S. or resist the inclination to use the GCPOA as another excuse to walk the reassure the allies and reign into aggressive to deter Iran's and demonstrate that we will not have a nuclear agreement to cover the aggression and the app doesn't reduce presence to prevent Iranian aggression or if their advantage is true that means Iran will pay the residual presence left behind. Disagreements are inevitable but they don't cause conflicts. Part 15. Iran's more likely to pursue a less aggressive foreign policy around the U.S. are not likely to become allies hindered by the political consideration and around the U.S. will remain those rival does not need to be hostile. The difference between need not lead to a military confrontation. Iran's an open and sympathetic relation with the results of the debate. There's a rate for the 3 years that Iran has reached a point where the constructive relation with Washington and the two can be in a way that they knew they use their energy against the other. Tehran is offering Washington natures and hard later backlash and the deal is inevitable to hard. In 15. The next role of the post-deal environment is dependent the conservative around the use of the agreement is a pretty to the containment of the factions after the first conservative deal to recreate Iran's nuclear program. According to the U.S. is moving to weaken Iran's capability by imposing the best conservatives within the White House and the empires of Iran's moderate view to support the moderates and the Trojan horse. And there's no chance of miscalculation. Mahdi in 15. Iran and the U.S. have overcome the most important reason for the detection of the constitutional nuclear agreement. The differences are severe. However, the more common nature of the nuclear agreement caused by the two countries reach conclusion negotiated better than the threats that shadow of the war that has left Iran in a plan. Super inefficient. U.S. contains Iran from dozens of bases outside the Gulf. 14. In the Gulf, the U.S. had a major base in every country. The Djibouti, Pakistan, CEDA, St. Paul's, Afghanistan, Iraq. There's almost no way the officers how thoroughly the U.S. military covers the region in Israel. Their states have been used anywhere in the air. They de facto base for the Mediterranean, in Egypt. The troops are maintaining installation elsewhere. The military has a base in Ethiopia, Kenya, Bulgaria, and Romania within PMCs fill in funnel 15. In 2003, the Army of Scouts, one of the what happened to the British militia to make up for the absence of the active duty force that the policymakers have exploited the way the great military the Marines would have put like diversities either to have company to do as Marines when the U.S. wants to put boots on the ground fight as you put 1,000 soldiers Army soldiers they call the boots on the ground and then you can ask that 5,000 contract and nobody in Congress seems to know where to ask. Which one?
That's fine.
Okay, cool. I'll do cross X.
Parsi evidence says it would be nice if conflicts and rivalry did not become violent. Where does it say it will or will not?
Neither of them have an incentive to make them escalate. They just want to talk. Basically.
No, this evidence says it'd be nice if they wanted to talk. Where does it say they will?
It says Tehran's openness to such a relationship is the result of debate that's raged for 3 years.
There's also something the counterplan would resolve.
Yeah.
Okay.
Resolve it.
Your solvency for the counterplan about terrorism says Iran already has talked about cooperating with Saudi Arabia. Why is the U.S. enforcing or affirming a multilateral regime
Because
to
of
solve
training.
that?
Because of training, all our links on the terror advantage are proof why U.S. is key. It's also talking about how Iran wants to get on board with everyone to fight ISIS because it's their
Where does it
biggest
say
threat.
the U.S.?
It says
Willingness to cooperate with
our-
the U.S. in search of a political solution.
Iran's decision to facilitate Malaki's removal signals the leadership's intent and willingness to cooperate
Why
with
does the-
regional countries and the U.S.
Okay, where does your waiver evidence says the Iran will accept it?
We'll read more evidence.
We'll read more evidence, but I think the ISIS argument that I just read says that they would accept it because they want to fight ISIS with the U.S.
What do we ontologically revision to? Or what is that revision?
The
What is
revision?
the revision? A rejection of the affirmative.
Yeah,
the way the
revising
impacts
seems to assume a new model. What is that new model?
We
Right.
say
it
the
is-
way you justify the plan is a bad action.
It's a one that reveals hegemonic masculinity that is embedded with not only the political but also within the affirmative.
What's the status of the counterclaim in the K?
They're conditional.
Conditional.
Can you kick planes?
Nope.
Okay, your shift disad seems to indicate China is mobilizing now. Why are they mobilizing?
No,
What?
China's
Oh,
not
okay.
mobilizing
No,
yet.
they're not. They're not mobilizing now. They don't see it as a threat. The plan would actually cause a bigger shift to Asia, which would cause them to mobilize.
Okay, what? Where do we say stuff gets redeployed? Or does it require a potential abuse argument?
What? Oh, yeah. This talks about how you could redeploy back in.
How? We
one
say
of your
withdraw
pieces-
from the Gulf.
one
Yeah,
of your
if you
pieces
make a
of-
research argument, this is what that's
Yeah.
going to preempt.
It also says that you should specify where if they go outside or if they're redeployed within the region.
Wait,
There needs to be.
how could they withdraw from the region and
You
then
don't
be
have
redeployed from
you
the
don't.
region?
You only say withdraw from the region. You only say that they should.
This seems to be like if we
region,
said
that they
withdrew
could
from
be withdrawn.
Iraq. I'm confused about the interpretation.
Yeah, we're just saying that if you try to make a research argument or that the posture should have changed, that's not talking.
Any evidence? Where does it make an intent to define? It just says
That
they did 80% and it was
that
substantial.
there was a historical when military presence was significantly reduced. We reduced
Where
it
does
by
that?
80%.
Yes. Okay. What is crisis politics?
Crisis politics in the instance of the after the justification for your impacts.
Okay.
So the Drew
It's
evidence
about,
talks about.
it's about identifying a point of crisis where we have.
Can I actually ask one last question? Oliphant was served as a director for Iraq as on the national security counter for Bush. Why is he a credible source on this? Because he seems to have investments in it.
That's an assertion.
Okay.
say it was?
650.
Okay.
Good work, everyone. Good work.
Well, without your affirmation, man, how would we ever get to
What I want every day. Scare me.
Was that okay.
But yeah,
Did you send it? Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's gonna be the T argument, terror, Iran, the counter plan, the criticism, the DA.
One second. Okay, we're ready when you are.
Okay. All right. Anyone now ready? We meet one AC rope nerve clarifies the reduction. What happens after the plan is a question for literature and linked debates, which promotes better debating counter-interpretations. After this, I have to specify beyond the checks of the resolution is CEDA. It's the only non-arbitrary statement when is CEDA avoid nine plan text and avoid an infinite variety of negative picks, which makes affirming possible. Their preclude transfer argument is obviously ridiculous. We are the topic. There's no chance of reinvention or researching. We're from OU reading a plan at CEDA. Give us a break. You are what caused OU to never read a plan again. No ground loss. We still link to every day stand on the topic. The counter plan clearly competes our interpretation more topic education, which is an impact in and of itself. Specific quantification is infinitely regressive and impossible standard. We don't make debate impossible. Cross-sex checks links to discount the redeployment argument just proves that there's no link to the pivot disadvantage. Obviously, we're a permanent reduction. There's no chance of resurgence. Reasonability is good enough. Competing interpretation concept race to the bottom of Libya theory debate. Potential abuse is not a voter. Another terrorism advantage.
Significance.
Oh, significance. We are obviously significant. They have not read a card that says that. We are not. We left only things like drones or minesweepers, which is clearly enough to be the 80% standard. Now the terrorism advantage. We solved the terrorism advantage 4 ways. 8 point is symbolism. U.S. presence causes terrorist recruitment to increase, and which is what sustains ISIS. And then the second, we slim down. We cause special operations to be more effective. Rogue nurse cites historical evidence that indicates that the plan is most effective. We did not eliminate all presence, but rather make sure the presence that remains, like small amounts of special operations units, are clearly effective. 3, political risk countries are not willing to cooperate with us, enforcing intelligence cooperation argument. We are far from winning against ISIS now. A lot in 326 since May 15, 2015. ISIS has been unable to launch a successful operation. Has been reduced to what Kurdish security officials here in Kurdistan described these pathetic attempts to make the presence felt. Is not to say the world will be over. ISIS has proven it has the capacity to revitalize and reorganize itself, revitalize and reorganize itself. The U.S.-led campaign argument does not matter. Plan forces regional actors to take accountability lane. 1 for offshore bounces to state of conflicts. Any involvement we can provide intel, logistics, backup training, occasionally use of air power, and force to shift the responsibility to regional powers. The wisest strategies pivot away from the Middle East. Regional actors want to do as little as possible to stop ISIS. The U.S. orchestrated coalition is fragile as long as they believe the U.S. will take care of the ISIS regional powers, free right to minimize their own commitments rather than focusing on ISIS. Washington needs to do less. Americans like to right to the rescue. Regional powers will take the lead in tackling ISIS. The solvency evidence indicates that people are offloading security commitments onto the United States now, which proves that there's no chance of coalition. Link out with link turn. The base structure inclusive reliance on repressive hosts, and the plan is also net effect is Vine 114 basis have generated real militancies. There's that correlation between president recruitment success according to Bowman, and base have been a major catalyst for anti-American U.S. air campaign against ISIS. Although informed militants to join on unprecedented scale. Part of the anger comes from a support the office of repressive hosts. Obama offered only typical criticism of Bahrain. U.S.-based offer legitimacy. Authoritarian regimes functionally conceded all of the impact evidence that they cannot. All the impact evidence. No, the regional fill argument was answered about. They said there's no impact. Yes, there was. They've all not read defense about terrorism. All of the arguments about the coalition, not all of the arguments about the coalition not working. Just do not answer the specificity of the advantage now. The Iran page. The deterrence arguments are obviously wrong. If that was the case, then Iran would not be doing things like testing nuclear missiles in the Gulf. Our evidence from 2 days ago indicates that is a direct response to U.S. President in the Gulf and threatening posture, which proves that deterrence necessarily fails. High risk of Iranian miscalculations post the nuclear deal, which makes hardliner influence evidence. There's a bar 15 concludes. F. Reading the Greek. Washington strengthens its presence in the Gulf. Actors misreading one's intentions, misperceptions become a recipe for conflict in combustible regions. They say that Iran hates residual presence. They've not read an argument on this. Our Freeman evidence indicates that Western borders are obviously key. Persian Gulf is definitely key. Even if there is misperception think there's no chance of retaliatory escalation in the world of the Africans. We remove the impact magnifier. Obviously, if we remove the entirety of the Fifth Fleet, Iran would be like, oh yeah, that's good. Who would ever care about the small bases that they cite? The backlash is inevitable. Argument does not prove a risk of escalation. The Part 15 definitely concludes that. They say no miscalculation does not assume recent nuclear missile tests, which post the geoenvironment, which makes miscalculation and conflict likely. They say that dozens of other races contain those answered above. They say that PMCs fall under zero impact in this argument in the context of the United States containing. Anything else? Counterplan? Permutation do both. Permutation do the counterplan. Permutation do the plan and all non-mutually exclusive part of the counterplan. Conditionality is a voting issue. You get one conditional. Obviously, if you get a criticism in the counterplan, they contradict and compete with each other, which skews two strategy makes the two seem possible. Wavering concludes the U.S. membership text form. Wavering Source 1014, the GCC would all certainly demand formal U.S. membership to support the counterplan to the U.S. To Iranian U.S. membership would be not with the Iranians. Washington Tehran could get agree that outside powers would not get the members. Definitely does not solve the terrorism advantage presence. Dex the counterplan candidate who get Iran on board. Wavering Source 1014 law form presents challenges the Gulf area will continue to demand external military backing to balance Iran to assert what it sees of rifle leadership around will continue to demand a Gulf that is free fall from U.S. forces. Hardliners perceive these as pawns in America's strategy, even circulating around no ISIS called good enough. 1021, this speech was one of several to warn young Iranians that America was seeking to use the deals to infiltrate the country with the cultural influences to shorten Islamic values. Another senior cleric endorsing communities, no negotiation stance, calling it the final word. Officials in Tehran have dismissed the idea of cooperating with the U.S. against ISIS. Iranian officials made clear a nuclear agreement will not change Tehran's policies. President crushes the counterplan's effectiveness. Barzarger tender while there exist issues between the U.S. and Iran and U.S. The roots of the impasse of mutual distrust of each other's role in the Middle East relations became more confrontational. Call-proof short-lived presence of the U.S. will inevitably change Iran's security and unleash rivalries. Actualization of Iran's power becomes dependent on the lessening of U.S. military presence. Iran's quest for regional role has debilitated increase in American presence. This has led to accommodating pressure posture by Iran. Balance of power has fostered tension and distrust, which proves that the counterplan cannot solve the AF, which Iranian scenario definitely uniquely goes nuclear because of regional drawing and miscalculation. Now, the criticism. All should be weakened away the affirmative clash. They shift the goalposts, which moves the one he makes affirming impossible and kills to protect the discussion about the topic. Reading the case, the counterplan or impact for me solves all of their offense. They should not be able to read criticism that contradict with all of the affirmative extinction first. It preserves the collective right to survive and ensures value for future generations. You should not sacrifice everyone of the K. No ultimate util. Every ethic devolves into utilitarianism, and we have to weigh harm anyways. Our reps are consistent feeling militarism of overseas present challenges securitization. Williams 11 can inhibit securitization, making actors reluctant to securitize and providing resources for opposing such as critique of liberalism risks being seriously misleading to liberalism fear, provide a rounded appreciation of politics of security and liberal politics and of how liberalism and fear can provide support for desecuritization. Liberalism and fear anti-utopian is seeing a world where violence is Romania irredeemable. It sides with facing after the worst, trying to avoid them as suspicious of grand moral visions. Fear should not always be avoided as inescapable, something that helps preserve us from danger. Fears collective concentration of power that makes possible institutionalized cruelty. Liberalism focuses on restraining fear success of liberalism and fears far from rejecting the state's role. It is to continually alert to the state's potential to do the opposite. Fear is not a one-way street to extremity. Nor does it operate in only emergency. Permutation do both. Permutation the alternative. Permutation do the plan and the alternative in every other instance. Positive is the best epistemology. Brown 11. The support for positive approach in IR. 70% of IR scholars still consider themselves a positive majority. And to do have the continued reliance on empirical methods or the failure of many reflectivists to offer suggestions to fill the epistemological void. It's not possible to be anything but positive truth claims, but the will have to come from somewhere. Continually deconstructing theories will only eventually be left with nothing that is considered legitimate theory. Epistemological relevance can deteriorate into condition of epistemological anarchy. Since a study of IR is observational, empirical positivism provides a framework that is made to be that if made to be self-reflexive and continue evolving could provide the stability needed. This is framing solutions in terms of state policy. The only way to solve Carpenter intent. There's an opportunity for feminist IR in fact in creating sound policy option. The key to speak the interests of the state. So if you can make the case of protecting women supports a broader goal, then you have a better chance if you limit yourself to critiquing the hegemonic discourse. Security such as teach IR feminists how to communicate with the defense established more effectively in terms likely to be taken seriously. Failure to engage the state seizes the power to the right and causes things like Iran or Iraq invasion in the first place. The plan reverses that permutation to both integrating gender and the mainstream IR solves better than the rejection cuts in. Intent of reject the claim that IR feminist approaches require non-quantitative methods. Qualitative work is also relevant. Seeking to integrate gender and security studies source validity insights by feminist IR scholars by taking them seriously within mainstream. Such analysts can be consistent with rethinking security on feminist grounds, drawing on insights from gender theory while speaking on the major consequences of security studies. We can speak to feminist and security scholars taking a gender perspective, need not entail and rejection of conventional methodology. Now the dissent. Withdrawal key to the pivot is also more than Google's nuclear Mizoki. 15, the Asian pivot will strengthen alliances and engage China. Crisis in the Middle East demanded Americans to the pivot is engaged being lost. 6 of the 9 nuclear powers and agent terror considered rogue or unstable intentions of ratchet up. The regional war, including China to Japan, is a real possibility. Such a war would involve the U.S. All of their deterrence about Iran arguments definitely contradict the deterrence. This thesis of the dissent Asian pivot is created global stability. China's rise makes that case to create 15 of the 4 largest economy 3 are needs to the stability of the world without wrestling whether the Houthis will win in Yemen will be shaped by the world's superpowers handle the rise in China. Alice is the note of the 15 cases of transition has taken place 11 times. The result was war. Washington's military in the league of its own, but so this can cause its own problems. The allies can be both a blessing and complication. It was the smaller allies that dragged the major parts of the World War I. Could Japan play a similar role that the Iraqis and Saudis with Washington should focus on Asia? North Korea's recent provocations in H-bomb tests heightens the risk of regional pro-life conflict and WMD aggression. Hertzman and once Kim's provocative behavior should tell the community what it needs to hear. North Korea intends to increase sophistication and delivery capability of the arsenal, making progress including ICBM, cyber, bio, and chem. The stakes are exponential. The U.S. is going to have to step up. Japan and South Korea are looking to us for assurances should they be attacked. It is the credibility of the commitment that keeps security lines intact to dissuade South Korea and Japan and South Korea from considering the nuclear option of the alliance. And come to understand the U.S. must now respond fairly to do so in the face of this. The U.S. would only erode security conditions in East Asia, would weaken international non-profits. Hard to say that they can generate impacts meaningful and coercive. We should diversify the means and mechanism by which the U.S. can signal a message to both assure allies and deter escalation. This includes capability. Kim should not feel that nuclear weapons and supporting delivery systems are beyond off limits. Asian arms race escalates to nuclear once a ball intent of nuclear fever throughout Asia could be deterrence and risk and creating a temptation toward nuclear preemption. And our invincibility could place U.S. prolif strategies onto the nuclear arms race, so would increase the likelihood of accident or inadvertent nuclear war. States have histories of protracted conflict. Unreliable command or control might permit a technical malfunction that cause an unintended or deliberate launch of faulty intel might cause one-sided misinterpretation, triggering preemption. 10 seconds. Anything else? All right. Open for cross.
So you leave drones, right?
Yes.
So your piece of buying evidence is that anti-Americanism is coming from the American Air Campaign. How do you solve anti-Americanism?
Well, the air campaign, the conventional air campaign that Vine describes is distinct from the special operations that are
where does it
Roadner
delineate
evidence.
that? Where does
Well,
it
the card is
delineate
only like a paragraph long, so in that card it does not have an explicit definition of what it means by air campaign. But if you look at the context of the card, it's definitely describing the conventional air bombing campaign.
Permutation check on the counterplan, perm do both, perm do the AF.
Perm do both, perm do the counterplan, all non-mutually exclusive instances. I think I said perm do the counterplan in there somewhere.
So the theoretical reasons to reject the theme are just conditionality, right?
The contradictions argument in the conditionality argument,
Okay.
yeah, but that's
Why are contradictions a reason to reject a team?
Excuse it to AC, every argument we make on one
Why?
flow gets generated as offense on the other.
So if we don't do
2AC
that,
arguments.
there's no reason to reject the team.
Well, obviously every argument we made in the 2AC has to contradict somewhere. So.
Okay, so let's talk about this piece of good enough evidence. What's this author's qualifications?
Which card?
The good enough evidence on this counterplan.
He's an international editor for CNS News.
What's CNS News?
I'm not sure what CNS News is, but given that it's a news organization that cites a
It's,
lot of other things, like officials in
I just want to see,
Tehran.
it's a conservative news network. How is this a qualified source to talk about Iran?
Well, because even if the bias is there, it cites officials in Tehran, which obviously did not lie about.
Yeah, the officials that's citing are the hardliners you talk about. Why is
Who
that?
obviously will not cooperate with the United States in a world where you want ISIS cooperation. Like, the highlighted portions, I think, are pretty good at this.
Your piece, we hear the top card you read on the counterplan just says Iran wouldn't want the U.S. leading the membership. Why is the
It says
counterplan
U.S.
doing that?
membership would be a non-starter with the Iranians, so just any presence. The second piece of Wavering Solsky evidence makes a similar claim, although it talks about Gulf states as well as Iran.
It says, the next line actually says, yeah, you have highlighted, says, Washington and Tehran could agree that while the U.S. and other outside powers will not remain members of the body, they could participate.
Well, which card are you talking about?
That same card.
The first?
The part you have highlighted, and it goes on to say that Tehran would agree as long as the other people in U.S. aren't members, they just consult.
Well, the counterpoint text is obviously about getting the United States and Iran to become members of the forum that Wavering Solsky talks about.
How is that true at all?
The text of the counterplan, also the Wavering Solsky article talks about creating the forum that you're talking about and says that
the
presence.
counterplan text is just
But
about military coordination.
even if that's not the case, I think the second Wavering Solsky card indicates that Arab states would never get on board if the U.S. did not lead, which is why Wavering lists like a bunch of challenges to the forum proposal he creates. So the first one would be if the U.S. leads or is a part of it, Iran would not get on board. The other argument is if the U.S. doesn't lead,
piece
they
of
wouldn't
Alden
get.
evidence. The title is Islamic State might attack Brussels, but it's losing Syria and Iraq. Why is it losing Syria and Iraq if they're winning?
We would think that they were losing some parts of Syria and Iraq because of the U.S. drone campaign, Special Operations Forces, which is what that plan defends.
Putting press. What was the double turn with Iran or something on that pivot just said?
Sorry, what was that?
You said like there's a double turn with like deterrence on Iran and the pivot.
He
Yeah,
says
the-
it's inconsistent.
Yeah,
Your deterrence.
I didn't say it was a double turn. I just said that if deterrence with Iran is true, then it should also be true with China.
Why?
Well, I mean, that's all I managed to say. But if you want a better answer, it'd be that theory of deterrence of the deterring actors is the exact same between nation states, assuming a
Okay, that's
realist
fine, thank you.
perspective of international relations.
I know. That's what saved it for the one in R. Don't worry, Box. It's all for you. Alright, y'all good? Great. Only a reason to plan outside expansion from all lands to the U.S. coalition is turning the tide against ISIS. We take my key territory and strongholds, and they are definitively losing their evidence. Is too old as now. The lynch also against the coalition strategies working because of U.S. leadership, which also answers any regional villain or returns the case leads to regional 214. That has no longer they also have no reverse cause weapons, which is how you should go to the link turn versus solvency. I'm not going to go for the impact defense, but only going for the straight turn, which means they cannot kick it. The symbolism argument does not make any sense because there's no evidence that ISIS cares or likes the plan. They small forms to solve. However, there's no evidence. It's a slim down solves ISIS. And when I say broader evidence, it's not reverse causal. It's not even about ISIS either. It's about ISIS is distinct because of their control of territory and current presence is key to Iraqi forces to fight ISIS to break through off the team. They are losing globally. Victories in Iraq here reverberate reverse programs elsewhere. Their authors under CEDA trend dealing on 2027. Territory is the determining factor for their continued existence. If we continue to squash country, ISIS will lose its capacity to exist, which also answers the recruitment argument by Chapter 15. Words and it's the last of the points last of the also has too many and he's only to call out someone again as to matters he the territory justice although we can share how they village which he came to wrestling people in terror the radio radio try up but their social media reach is also shrinking which answers the war of the Aladdin evidence equal to 22 that's not true. Recruitment is failing. They can't even pay employees due to U.S. airstrikes. CBS and 223 ISIS or 23 by south of the equivalent direction of prices telling you what happened. These relations really were millions of finance use of pollution and begin turning oil from cash towards also the one you see evidence not only includes the military defense necessary by ISIS, but also says they are making those efforts now. Had 10, 11, 3 years for a broad plan. They say located in the White House now. He's filling an argument. There is no regional fill in the student Arabs causing the rise because they don't have the resources to empirically analyze also have unless they use their lead to rally local populations. The U.S.-backed campaign is the only option piece of which one and see direct the evidence leading from behind doesn't work. Doesn't solve anti-Americanism, devastates security relationship that necessary to fight terror brands and attain the U.S. key to solving security challenges in the region. That's a prerequisite to establishing good governance and reform. Stop it, 15 can change. Not understanding this strategy for option for the Middle East for the Middle East with also answers their vying evidence. Also, I'm going to prove the blowback argument here. Empirics go our way. When we determined Americans here years ago to create a power vacuum that allowed ISIS to create safe havens, and the app is also not reverse causal withdrawing, does not create security. ISIS recruitment has nothing to do with blowbacking of a team. The journal the cargo advantage too. I'm not going to go for the offense here, but there are two double lines. We're going to go for the offense and reduce the presence to prevent Iranian aggression, which case effects are inevitable. Negative presumption Iranian aggression stays limited, which case the sign of your lowest advantage. The solvency advocate does not see small footprints. Also ran the officer recurs has never extended presence in the region and considers expulsion necessary, which proves that Iranian's presence doesn't zero sum game. The plan would be a slap in the face with some cause and pull secretly, like their evidence describes, and they also U.S. forces does not just mean boots on the ground. Their evidence is generic about use of force. All German special ops and intel or all U.S. forces got check next. Either disagreements no because Iran needs to deal with U.S. trying to control them, or minor tension is minimal but doesn't escalate except parsing tomorrow. Both these nuclear differences are in close to let's hear for policy. And Toronto wants the U.S. Toronto wants the U.S. on the to bar, aka their authors is a hurling backlash because Iranian leaders in the deals prelude to containing their nuclear policy. Arguments from the absence of mission and the magnitude of low plan is massively insufficient. We contain from a dozen or because their author concludes police we keep containing. After the police, we define them as PMCs also feel in purely provable forces are downside here, track factory going to full security gap. Another reason why containment is no, the only two easy responses is that there's no impact. They have no delineation in any of their solvency that indicates that the plan or whatever the cross explanation was explanation was sufficient to resolve our which means you should for our logical arguments which prove the containment is inevitable. Their evidence also does not assume the deal will either go to actually, and their evidence says GP opposition means they don't solve Crowley 116. They're also opposed to 14. Plan causation on military looking for ways to shift forces from to the Middle East from to go to Asia from the Middle East. The plan becomes a vehicle for that to happen. Okay, evidence that the treaty has happened from the Persian Gulf to but because causes nuclear where China happens faster and East Asian arms race rapid military build up the key regions like the SCSA Chinese fears that we are encircling them are clear evidence that the motivations of Chinese leadership is sensitive to constant development of police which feel Japanese society to break out arms race and miscalculation of the say withdrawals go. You should frame the impact under the lens of whether or not escalation is more likely now. The pivot is down. The plane is the missed up that makes escalation likely. Cooks in at 15. The Asian the pivot is now, but presence in the Middle East directly turns off cooks at 15. Washington's focus and personal some escalation tensions are more numerous than ever. Now, these are carrying evidence. Chinese posturing will escalate status quo based on Chinese threat calculations. China 15. What are you trying to get police to the United States ability to use their kind of values because it's too common, much more closely united. A situation which was concentrating where the investment is showing things by national living weapons and increased independence. They're trying to understand that they have no desire to Germany's losing business in this new area. And Asia pivot leads to China rise young and 12 years later, Asia leads to Germany and that's really opposite of the future happening there because you policy trying to put Asian countries in mutual. They're trying to get technology, stage maintain present peace and right to China, China. But this one is coming in secular trade. The new spaces is coming up in how it's a double turn. I have no idea why this is true. It's just a blanket assertion. It was just blanket assertion that you see. Also, there is a common evidence from our freelance item, which might for our evidence. It's also much better than the Hersman card. This is not even China containment. It is very distinct. It's just all the context. It's just all the context about why generically North Korea is causing Japan and South Korea to necessarily rethink their nuclear program. That doesn't indicate when that's going to happen. Which why for a time frame analysis, for a time frame argument, which it would happen faster than North Korea and South Korea would be able to what would happen faster than they'd be able to proliferate, acting to constrain China, heighten security competition tensions that make nuclear war substantially more likely. The link only goes one way. Shoop at 15. Chris also China not a national interest. The U.S. and the Pakistan and New York. Destruction of the first world space the president dealing with other destruction of the armies and armies and every coalition got also realistic and use force information corporation because of possibly see where the nation of the president opposite now perfect officers by their policy of nuclear war. Nuclear war. I have no idea why they read. I have no idea why they read pieces of all evidence. That's our impact. Which is why you should. Yeah, that's fine. It's just a question. It's just a question of the impact turn. Go to back to the Iranian advantage. No risk of miscalculation. Iran recognizes that it cannot keep with U.S. power. They won't engage in any form of conflict, preventing escalation. Policy 15. Iran is our relative limit of the U.S. and so is Iran territory. Iran is recognized as Iran capacity. Willing to have approximately opposite of American. Military policy just seems different when they try to get less nuclear initial because U.S. embracing Iran the absence of a sharper role. You see all those attacks that only makes the situation worse.
Okay. Which piece of evidence cites current ISIS territory holding?
All of the evidence in the one NC and the two pieces of evidence I read, like at the top to answer your Latin. So the De Leon card. Yep.
Beauchamp evidence is from fairly. It's like from mid-2015. If this is the case, why has ISIS not been defeated by the military right now?
You should look at the De Leon evidence if you don't like the Beauchamp card. The Beauchamp card is more about like how the U.S. coalition strategy operates and what is necessary to defeat ISIS. That evidence gives a really good argument about why territory is key, why if we continue to squash their territory, like our De Leon and all of the evidence says, that means they will cease the capacity to exist.
Which piece of evidence cites capacity or territory beyond just Syria and Iraq? Which piece of evidence cites either influence or territory beyond just Syria and
One,
Iraq?
we don't think that's necessarily relevant in the context of the AF, since if you're going to go for that argument, that also means that you do not solve ISIS.
Okay,
Does that make
that's
sense?
fair. The ISIS. the ISIS recruitment has nothing to do with blowback argument.
Yes.
What is the warrant for this?
Yeah, the angle card is on the context of how it kind of makes the argument that you're Aladdin evidence sites, which is that ISIS is an idea, right? It has nothing to do with just military presence, like the response to it. Rather, they just want to wage global jihad, which is why the app is not reverse causal, and why only the U.S.-led coalition can stand the app.
So the U.S. has been militarily fighting ISIS for like a year now. So other than the small territory gains of 10%, which you're
Actually, no, it says actually 30%, but yeah, keep going.
Okay, other than the 30% loss of territory in just Syria, what else have we done against? Okay.
Huh? The other two cards I read about social media and recruitment, I think give a pretty good argument as to why that would be true as well.
Okay, the other thing we didn't get a lot of the cards that you read on this advantage, so is it possible that we can just stop process and get a copy of the
Yeah, which ones are you thinking you didn't
Like
get?
the first half of the speech?
Yeah.
They're all in there. They might be like in a different order.
We didn't have a lot of the answers like blowback.
Yeah.
Like
No, it's there. ISIS recruitment has nothing to do with blowback. I'm looking at the doc.
yeah, and then before that I have let me grab my phone. Yeah, I think you just need to resend the doc.
I sent the doc. Unless there's a card you really think you didn't get, I've sent it all.
Okay. It might have just been out of order then.
Yeah, that's what I think happened.
Did you read this card that says President's key to train Iraqi troops to fight ISIS? Why do we need a massive military force to train Iraqi troops?
Because our argument is that Sunni Arabs do not have the capacity or the resources.
Yeah, so
to
we
do
have
so.
like 3,000 troops in Iraq right now. They're advisors to train people.
Oh, do you like all of a sudden not withdraw those?
Well, I mean, like, we just, like, leave advisors. Obviously, we would remove a lot of them, but why do we need so many people to train Iraqi
I mean, if you're going to
troops?
make this new argument, I guess I'll answer it in the 2-NR and you'll find out then.
Well, I'm just curious, why do we need so many people to fight, or to train Iraqi troops to fight ISIS?
I think all of our evidence is the context of why status quo presence is necessary and sufficient to continue to squash out ISIS in their territory.
Okay, the argument about social media training, what is the warrant in that argument?
Yeah, the argument is on the context of how, like, answers the bottom part of your Aladdin evidence about, like, ISIS is being an idea, people are just, like, attracted to them and stuff. That's what it answers, I guess, if that
Okay.
is your question.
Which card is this they can't pay people?
Huh?
Which card is this they can't pay people?
CBS 223.
Because we definitely don't have that
Yes,
card.
you do. I'm looking at the doc. It's at
Where
the
is
very
it?
bottom.
The very end?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, under the alt,
Wait,
under the
under-
Iran advantage?
After Iran? Okay. Ingle?
Hmm?
Or
Okay.
CBS? Okay.
I also just sent you one card that I didn't know was in there, but that's it. Other than that, everything is in there.
Yeah, the Brandon Moon's on it.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's gonna be K, then counterplan. The title of the doc is a lie. It's more than one.
I'm gonna look at the doctor and just make sure I'm not wrong. Yeah, I even said the brain card. Okay.
I have my fingers crossed that was pre-answer.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's okay, yeah, I did. Sounds like okay.
You. Okay, anyone not ready?
You can cross-apply the permutation just to test the competition of answer the contradictions on the counter plan.
On the counter.
Counter plan solves the entirety of the case and provides a framework jumpstart regional cooperation withdrawal guts that because the lack of U.S. ability to impose costs on Iran means that they can cheat on the deal and freaks out. GCC stays in the conflict rather than cooperation in the region solves fears and ISIS prefer or evidence is newer and assumes that nuclear deal framework and its more realistic way or use that ability regional cooperation form will be a long process. All the links and app cards for the region is too volatile for any action to solve immediately. Only the counter plan can lock in the long-term cooperation needed. I'm going to read a piece of Mohishing evidence indicates all work within a regional it will work within regional folks, including all the people that they talk about. It wouldn't. I'm going to read the card that wasn't highlighted. Iran's decision to remove its support from Malaki was a demonstration of its own flexibility and accommodation for regional powers. Now the counter plan solves GCC will remain exclusive part, but exclusive post plan only the counter can foster regional cooperation. Way 15. The GCC, a key pillar of the existing order, includes Iran and Iraq. It doesn't include a platform of dialogue. Many security challenges are reducing tension and managing crisis, and a new and inclusive regional security dialogue that would complete the U.S. regional strategy, the balancing around Iranian integration and regional structure could create opportunities lower Arab Iranian tensions in the Gulf, while allowing for the United States to impose some concentrate on the continued behavior that threatens the core American dangers. Now I'm going to read a couple of the cards from the 1EC that conclude that the counterplan would be able to solve their peace. So Rover and Talmud evidence indicates that by retaining intelligent capabilities and skeletal base and infrastructure, Washington can reassure y'all states that it's committed to the free flow of oil and all that will counter Iran mischief. That means the Gulf states want U.S. to maintain presence. Now their peace pose and evidence goes for the multilateral coordination arguments. It says that the United States must show by its action that it's not the enemy of the Islamic State, means the regional cooperation is necessary. Now there's a lot of piece of evidence from the 1EC that it concludes that regional organizations give them Malaki and rendered evidence says U.S. efforts to engage men with Iran must is only half-hearted with engagement to pursue the American negotiations. It has been flexible in the belief that Iran cannot be expected to negotiate in good faith unless they're simultaneously threatening the coercive measures. Now the Freeman evidence indicates that Iranian domination in the region would have its limit. Iran would enjoy a sphere of influence dependent on its alignment with the United States on other issues. The growth of Iranian power to the limits of the clear understanding would benefit both the United States and Iran. The U.S. Iranian alliance would have distasteful yet necessary. Now Rovin and Talbot evidence indicates that GCC countries want the United States to remain in the region not only as a bulwark against Iran but also to tamper down rivalries amongst themselves. Like the permutations usually group them all. The individual planks are necessarily able to solve. Means there's no net benefit of the permutation. Any disadd that we go for is going to be a disadd to the permutation. Not permutation. Yeah. There's a severance that means they would sever out of military presence. The plank increases military presence. They aren't able to do that. A perm to the counterplan steals 2AC. It steals a negative computation, makes it impossibly negative. We can only go for the status quo. Now permutation is impossible because the first place increases the presence of the region. If we can't keep flanks, they can't pick out of them. Means with the permutation, the best for reciprocity. Now the act limited role undermines U.S. influence. And 15. The U.S. supports by Washington with surgical and designated specifically short-term goal. Person desirable outcomes because the Middle East security problems are hard like limit to terrorism and illicit and non-average U.S. security person raise undermining the U.S. influence and losing traditional U.S. regional partnership roles and for the security will address the other security address the effect of the U.S. strategic interests as well as regional security. Now the conditionality debate counter-interpretation conditionality is good key can add a negative flexibility negative roles and negate the resolution conditionality polarization is crucial tool. This outweighs their argument because negative flexibility is key competitive equity balancing side by now policy making or interpreting the best model for policy making because it's flexible process the most rewarding time and strategies are inevitable teams will always be faster in theory topicality arguments will always produce a time and strategic trade-off. The counterplans are preferable these ways because they increase education and equally time trade-offs. Now air negative on theory the affirmative gets first and last piece and infinite time and check applies now the contradictions argument 2 and R lines our advocacy will pick a strategy that remedies any abuse claims because they get the first and last piece. Now there's no form of contradiction. They should be able to concede one to get out of it. They have to win that the reading the K and the counterplan make the 2AC literally impossible, otherwise cross-apply reasonability from their 2AC. Now their piece Rahi evidence, I'll read the underlined part I didn't process. It says that they don't say that as long as the United States isn't a leader in the forum, Iran would still get on board. No part of the counterplan mandates that U.S. believes just that they propose the idea and that the Iran can accept Rahi and Solsky 1014. Washington could argue that outside of the powers of the members, they could participate in subgroups of new forum dedicated discussing the security, the confidence-building measures, and eventually perhaps arms control measures. Now, GCC definitely says yes, U.S. and the military presence key to assure talks for Republican 15. Arab allies fear that the U.S. intends to use any deal with Iran as to get on the Middle East free card. The danger is that the Gulf states are more likely to get Iran chase. The campaign in Yemen is a perfect example of the probably they could provoke an aggression of the U.S. not there to reassure the Gulf states that things could get very ugly. Iran is even the U.S. American partner Iran are unwilling to challenge U.S. and empower military in the absence of American military and GCC cities to become friendly. How an overextended GCC official may know about and saying that they felt power to do so with the United States. Now their next piece of evidence that was already answered about another piece of Goodman evidence. This is pretty laughable. Comes from CNS News, a conservative news network with no credibility, no creds or qualifications. It's just cherry picking the hardest of hard lines to prove his point. Second, seriously, one great article from this. The amount of times Obama has said the word "I" or means really riveting, but the counterplan planks are going to be able to solve. The piece of Goodman evidence is just about the nuclear deal, not about the counterplan. The only war front that talks about how they don't want to get on board with ISIS, but our piece of Mohseni evidence indicates that Iran removed Malaki post this piece of evidence to signal to the United States that they would definitely want to get on board with attacking ISIS. Means our evidence post it's there and says that because Iran got rid of Malaki, they would definitely want to join in. And the last piece of evidence, the third plank, is going to be able to solve because it just says that presence would be something that Iran would fear, but the plank is able to solve because it gets regional cooperation on board. I mean, Iran knows the reason why we're in the Middle East, not to contain them anymore, but the ISIS argument is going to uniquely outweigh our piece of evidence. Is much newer. This is from 2010. Ours is much newer and contextual.
What was it?
650.
The pivot just
One
said.
second. Pivot, yeah.
And then the counterpoint.
So you were starting on terror.
Yes.
One second, let me download it.
Where is it?
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I don't know, man.
Y'all good now? Okay.
Most affected by policy changes.
You are?
Everyone good now? Territory should not be the determining factor of seriously only evidence makes a comparative claim about the nature of military versus diplomatic strategies, i.e. the ability to have a cooperation on these particular issues is better strategy, or ISIS not winning now evidence takes this into account that yes, we might be winning in Syria and the other issues, but that forces them to go nuclear, which is the whole thesis argument. The cooperation makes drones more effective, which means the affirmative does not lead to blowback, which means your blowback argument does not answer this argument, which means they are the only possibility of creating nuclear weapons, which means there is no argument. They say it leads to redeployment. We get durable if it does not go back in the region. It's obviously a double turn with their T argument. They say no evidence says that they're winning now. Our evidence says yes, they might be losing in Syria ISIS, but it forces them to go elsewhere. Only diplomatic strategies that deal with the issues at hand is able to do it, and ISIS is winning globally. The newest FRT news in 322 Brussels reflection on large ISIS capabilities. ISIS more terror than they did at any time. ISIS strongly jihadist network. Their next evidence it says it's losing globally because territory should not be the determining factor, because territory is ever changing. It does not ignores that the constant text shapes how violence happens, which means your BOCHEP evidence is not responsive. They say they do not have enough money to hire social engineering, but there's not an impact to this argument. Not reason why they can't pay employees. They say the question about rally around the flag effect, and they read the brand's evidence. The brand's evidence not responsive assumes a model of deterrence, which we win any arguments. This is wrong. They say they're key to solve the coalition. Our lane evidence decks this argument because it indicates that the coalition inevitably fails because it forces it allows other people to just bank on the United States, i.e. yes, the U.S. is carpet bombing in the status quo, but other people don't do it, which means U.S.-led coalition is less net effective. They have no comparative evidence on this question. They also can't beat ISIS. Ignatius in 1015, the tide is turned in the war against Islamic State. The group has become a global force can try to carry Europe or Asia or Africa. The self-caliphate supporting 21 countries established and international players. It answers your empirical blowback argument, which means, yeah, anything else? Yep. You're up. Concede that containment's inevitable. The affirmative is not enough. I'm not going for this argument, which means it's not responsive, but this evidence indicates that if they view it as zero sum, I will concede this argument because no amount of military presence will mean the counterplan has no ability to solve it. If so, it means your Tehran cooperation argument isn't responsive. The pivot design. None of their evidence answers the specificity of the arguments. Our Misokami evidence is fantastic and not very well responsive. It is an empirical analysis. 9 of the only nuclear people are in the region. If we win a risk of instability, this is a magnifier for the level of probability because the more nuclear weapons in the region, the more likely it's go to war. The China debate proper. China right now empirics through multiple scenarios for conflict. Krepovich in 15 China claims its right peaceful action cell. A revision of power seeking to dominate Pacific Basin claims sovereignty over Taiwan. Sikaku. CS and the SA were 6 centuries maintained claims have been unapologetic. In 2014, China police select the Philippines. 2 months later, China moved an oil rig into Vietnam's exclusive economic zone. China cut off exports to Japan of rare earth elements. The U.S. declared the Senkaku would take military action. Their first argument is that Japan could rethink programs. There's no piece of evidence about this, which means your argument that China rights is not happening now ignores empirics. The 2AC evidence indicates is empirical analysis of the 15 shifts within hegemonic notions of power. 11 of them caused war, which means if we run a risk that the status quo is modernization, attempting to take Taiwan, the only possibility is doing it. They have conceded. Which answers their next argument. Our next evidence indicates that it is necessary to fight Korea. They have zero evidence about this. They have just said that we do not have a piece of evidence about pivot. Our evidence indicates that military action is necessary. All your evidence about the pivot being dead now are our arguments, which means we have conceded the link turned into impact turned it, which means the pivot is necessary to deter North Korea. Klinger in 15 perceptions. U.S. rhetoric correct and now been backed by commitment. commitment to Washington remains focused on the crisis elsewhere. Implication for Asia and North Korea. Test the USA pursue policies integral to stability in the Asia, control of Asia by hostile power, threaten America's security interests, stability in Asia, being threatened by in-case military capabilities to deter opponents. The U.S. must maintain its strong military presence in adventurism goes to nuclear. This is Kelly. In 14 million, North Korea just remain a threat. Nuclear deployment could spark a nuclear spiral. South Korea and Japan might well be counter-nuclearized. This could worsen the regional security dilemma, changing the U.S. into nuclear chains. Their humanitarian connection. South Korea is not ready to absorb a chaotic should North Korea explode. It can provoke a Chinese intrusion and lead to a clash between the U.S., which answers their last argument about acting constrained. China inevitably wants to become a hegemonic region, which forces them to go to Taiwan, which has war. Anything else? I'll do the condo debate at top. They have not given a counter-interpretation, which means you have really screwed up this debate, which means if we win any of our risk of negative actions, they have just had a reasonability argument. I will do the impact debates at top versus strategies. Q makes the 2AC impossible because we never get the minutes back ruled on the counterplan or the criticism, which answers your negative flexibility argument because you can still have flexibility within one conditional advocacy, but that we are necessary to have some basis by which we can have the debate in the first place. Strats Q is inevitable. Yes, we could have straight turned all of your GSADs or may force you to go for certain arguments. They say the counterplan is preferable because real-world educational skills are not a terminal impact to this debate. Is only valuable because clash we win up arguments about strategy skewing the debate and forcing the one error to be impossible. It means you should vote negative. They say there is no proof on reasonability. Reasonably presumes you have an interpretation that is reasonable, which means you literally allow infinite amount of conditional advocacy. It means even if you don't like this argument in the abstract, they have no game on it. The counterplan does not solve the entirety of it. Permutation, non-mutual exclusive parts of the alternative cooperation is inevitable. Their evidence says that in the status quo, if their reading of the waiver evidence is true, then would allow it in the status quo. Our waiver evidence says yes, that they might be subgroups, but that does not mean training, which means your link argument on the case page about needing a training isn't a result by the app because that's diplomatic strategy. The affirmative is not resolved. Your rereading of the waiver evidence and your Rogers evidence is not responsive because we're not going for that debate. So your Posen evidence, the Posen evidence you read is radically misread and says that we need diplomatic strategy, which your affirmative obviously that's not resolved. The last piece of evidence in the 2AC evidence indicates that this is necessary.
Go down.
Thanks.
That's fine.
Counterplan, pivot, advantage one. Alright, everyone good on that? They have to win the reading a can. The counterplan made the 2AC literally impossible, otherwise cross-apply reasonability from the 2AC, but the 2AC also the potential abuse is never a voter, which is why you should for limited conditionality, which is exactly what happened here. You should not allow the 2A to sit on this because that would be totally freaking asinine. We do have an interpretation. We said conditionality is freaking good. The 1A concedes the real world policy making, which is the real world, the better internally to education was which is the only impact that really matters. 2AC strategy is literally never. Teams are always being faster, better. Theory arguments and team arguments are always going to turn out that there is no reason why the counterplan reading the criticism necessarily made that impossible. You should point, point to anything that actually happened that made it 2AC harder. They should just get faster. But I thought the 2AC was actually pretty fine with this argument because not many said that they could have straight turn disads. They just chose also they didn't impact on a disad. We did not do anything, which is why Derek in the cross eyes. The 2AC simply said, okay, as long as we don't do this, are we good? Which definitely proved reasonably negative flexibility is better. The negative will to negate the resolution conditionality rights is a crucial strategic tool that outweighs all arguments. Has net flex is key to competitive balancing and ask side by they get the first and last each infinite prep time to choose. The debate will be about nothing but the 1AC strategy. Make that harder. The next job. It's the next job too. Negate the from their interpretation makes it possibly negative. 2AC can just read a bunch of bad 2AC add-ons. That we should have the ability to counterplan on conditionality is key to check that outside bias. Check that outside bias. Is that good? Yep. Go to the counterplan top level first. You should do the counterplan, do the lens of fishing, whether or not it's all the ISIS advantage. The threshold should be really freaking low. Your counterplan all the entirety, the entirety of the rights of framework to genocide, regional cooperation, withdrawal, guts, and even lack of usability to impose constant autonomy means they can just cheat the field of the leaving presence, still false and keep the military coordination with their Iran wants to be backed up with the fight against ISIS, which is like Permi do both is not able to solve the disaster because we have to have presence, which means even if you think they win, a permutation might be good in the abstract. You can judge the counterplan anyways because permutation does not solve the straight turn on ISIS. Also, all the links on ISIS are reason why presence is necessarily good, which is why the counterplan is resolving regional cooperation is able to not only resolve all their uniqueness arguments on the straight turn about ISIS losing now, but it means it's also we're able to solve their fill-in, their coalitions argument infinitely better because we get Sunni Arabs on board to resolve ISIS, which is why you've got a permutation. You have permutation you both between counterplan. You can't sever the planks. What else?
This thing.
Seeding the Iran containment doesn't get them out of it. If the
Yeah,
counterplan
seeding-
saw that's a net benefit.
If the counterplan also the call plank solves the Iran advantage to create security for between Iran and Russia because they can just voice their opinions to the United States and solve any risk of faculty. They say Iran says ISIS internally disputing Iran war because ISIS' biggest threat is the Sunni evidence, which is also more contextual than the unqualified piece of evidence that they read. They're good that evidence is hard. Just as they would not cause hard letters for Iran, kick them out of the because they wanted to signal two things: one, that it would work with regional groups, and two, it would work with the United States. The training argument.
Yes.
The training or first maintaining current forces just adds more works with everyone, which solves the counterplan a lot better. They say the U.S. leads in going for GCC groups would not get on board. Doesn't have an offensive reason as to why makes a counterplan bad. We try to win that Iran gets on board. enough to solve the advantage.
They can see containment as
They can see containment is
inevitable.
inevitable. The counterpoint solves that the app can't go to the pivot. I'm not going to go for a big house network. They did not get the new North Korean terminal impact as the new. The one in C. The one in C was just a North Korean uniqueness claim. Whatever impact events into North Korea, the 2 and C, and that had not been the case. You should just clarify the 10 evidence which indicates that which would answer the entirety, but China has never, of course, not going to happen because China was never going to challenge the US because of the cost. Hegemony outweighs any benefits of nationalism. This evidence is really good studying Chinese analysts and Chinese perceptions. Which is the Chinese perception, which also the turn on terrorism is also going to outweigh any impact analysis. Why you prefer that go there now? Only risk of ISIS expansion by giving the window of opportunity. Have no reverse possible evidence, which would be how you build a link for salty. Running risk ISIS expands means that they get the bomb and we deploy, which turns the entirety of the app into currently causes nuclear terrorism. Presence is key. It's key training. There's no other alternative. We sent more troops last year trained by local strike fighters and improve the ability to plan, lead, and contact millions of the resource, the ability to recruit more troops. They say small forces solve no dozen. There's no evidence that says slim down falls. When you see Rover is reverse causal, it's not even about ISIS. If no evidence about ISIS is not solving whatsoever. It's all about Al-Qaeda. ISIS is distinct because they're controlled territory. Even if you think ISIS is still doing stuff now, they have no evidence that the plan would definitively lead to villain and solve anti-Americanism. We are winning now. They're losing globally for the dealing on evidence that need to be the Garrison across the foundation for defense democracy. We just drove ISIS out of the largest territory. They have lost 30% of it in Syria and Iraq, which is why it's important because those are their strongholds, which determines how they influence things globally. We are kicking their ass so hard. Only risk the plan jump ship too early. Territory is key. A determining factor for their existence. Approaching that's really good. Answers are unique. It's predictive. Since ISIS keeps losing territory, they will lose their capacity to exist. All recruiting and funding will dry up. Social media and funding are all down now, which is something that they can see. That the villain arguments, all I really have to answer is there's no regional villains. Many Europeans cannot stand up to ISIS because they don't have the resources. And empirically, allies do not step up unless the US is there to lead round to rally local populations. As your card says, also the SOB evidence is really good here. Says change cannot happen without addressing immediate security. Both states have no resources, no capacity. They can never afford to contribute to the fight as long as they perceive existential threats. The SOB evidence is really good. It's the only card of good governance. Leading from behind doesn't work. Our brand's evidence is directly responsive to their lane evidence. It indicates that we have to do a shit ton more to solve anti-Americanism and devastate security relationships. That it's necessary to fight toward their lane evidence. Their lane evidence is just as free riding is bad, but it doesn't say the plan leads to coalitions. Also, there's a huge time frame delineation, which is SOB evidence provides all the new when air cards are really old. Do not assume also from RT News. The RT News cards is just about Brussels' argument is that they do not solve the going elsewhere argument, which is why only squashing territory in Syria and Iraq, like are dealing on, and Bojan Consensus is able to squash them out forever.
2 minutes starting now. The chapter. Oh, I haven't seen surprised I did not notice that at all. Okay, the pivot DA, the counter plan, the advantage. Okay. Too little time on the pivot DA and the 2NR means that they automatically lose the round. They've conceded the only scenario for nuclear escalation that has no impact defense or link defense on it, which is the North Korea impact. Yes, it was in the 2AC. The 2AC read Hersman 167, which indicates that North Korean aggression is now recent H-bomb testing means that U.S. strong deterrence is key. The 1AR just read a new impact card, which means that the 2NC should have at least played some impact, or should have played at least some impact defense. And not doing that allows the 1AR to read an impact evidence for us. This all obviously any of the answers to North Korea would be new in the 2NR. It should have been in the block because the North Korea argument was clearly flagged as a straight turn. Argument to the disadvantage. Now the North Korea argument, yes, it causes adventurism. The 1AR evidence indicates that adventurism goes nuclear. Only credible U.S. deterrent as a result of reinvigorated pivot causes them to not do it. It was the only scenario for nuclear war, which also draws in China and turns that part of the cases. Turns that part of the case. Now they should not be able to win the North Korea debate because it is functionally conceded in the 2NR and is the easy place to hang your hat. Now the China debate proper, all the China evidence answers argument was not explained in the 2NR. It was literally just an assertion. They say we're not happening. They've conceded 1AR competence 15 evidence indicates that China rises now as a result of lack of presence. If not having presence was the case and the pivot is dead now, then obviously China should not have escalated. But the 1AR evidence cites multiple things such as South China Sea, ECSC, Japan, Senakaku Islands, as well as multiple flashpoints of escalation in the Philippines, which all indicates that China rises not being effectively deterred. Now the 1AR is the only one who read an effective, or the 2AC and the 1AR are the only ones who read evidence that says that yes, deterrence works in the context of China, and the 2NR analysis was just not good here because they do not have an answer to China rise now, which means they cannot functionally win this debate. Another conceded impact nuclear scenario because any defense on the terrorism debate should be an easy place to hang your hat because you should not do any work for them. Anything else?
They also concede that causes the arms race and instability.
They also concede that causes arms race and instability. Some volatile evidence was conceded. Time frame weighting should not outweigh any of the arguments about impact calculus and how the fact that they have literally no arguments and strength of link and probability should outweigh all these arguments. Anything else? Counterplan? Permutation do the plan and all non-mutually exclusive parts solves the entirety of the cases. The 2NR did not extend a single argument for why presence was key in terms of the counterplan, which means that forming the region solves every single one of the links to the tier DA. The 2NR only answered permutation do both, which obviously does not answer permutation do the part of the counterplan that did not compete. They also do not extend any theoretical reasons for why this permutation was illegitimate other than severance and about not severing planks. We did not sever any part of the 1AC because we say that we should retain presence or reduce presence, but also get people along with the regional along with the region, which solves every single one of the arguments about regional fill-in and cooperation on the ISIS page. Obviously, the judge kick argument is abusive. They said 2NR choice selects checks all of the abuse on conditionality, which means that you are stuck with the counterplan, which means permutation shields every single link. The counterplan independently cannot solve. Anyways, the 1AR made an argument that says that it would not work. The double-blind argument was still conceded, which is that either the U.S. retains presence in the area, which Iran would not be willing to get on board, or it does not retain presence, which means the Arab states would not get on board. This is literally a list from Wayre's article that says that there are a lot of problems with this form would not succeed. Anyways, the link should seal it. They say the counterplan solves the Iran advantage. 1AR kicked it and extended their impact defense, which means that if all of the containment stuff inevitable means that the counterplan cannot solve it in any potential way because Iran would still perceive it that way. The 2AC evidence says the Berserker evidence says that Iran perceives presence as effectively containing, which means the counterplan would not be able to overcome the strength of that argument. And we can see the impact defense here anyways.
The permutation also solves the containment.
The permutation also solves all the containment arguments. Now the terrorism advantage proper. They said that we have no reverse causal evidence, but yes, we do. I think that 1AC evidence is fantastic on this. That Posner and the Rovner evidence are the only ones that cite history and empirics on this issue. That says that slimming down the military makes it more effective. Special operations and drones are way more effective at combating Al Qaeda than any other group. They say that territory is key, but if that was the case, then why did drones and special operations also solve Al Qaeda, who also relied on having Afghanistan as key? We did not win in Afghanistan as a result of having tons of troops there. We only won as a result of effectively using special operations forces. With the 1AC leaves in place, which makes the plan way more effective. Even if we do not have reverse causal evidence, I just do not think that they can win the terrorism advantage when they have conceded the 1AR evidence, which is the most piece of recent evidence in the round. The RT News evidence, it both indicates that Brussels disproves that military interventionism works, but also proves that they have expanded territory. It cites the former CIA director and says that ISIS has more territory now than ever before. They've conceded two arguments that bypass all of their defense about the nature of whether or not we kill terrorists or not. Citroen evidence says that the only possibility for nuclear terrorism to happen is when they are fearing by totally squash. The 1AC and the 2AC and the 1AR have all extended this argument that says that they will threaten to go nuclear if they are truly militarily threatened, which means that they cannot solve any of the advantage. You will concede that the affirmative cannot fully resolve ISIS in its entirety, but we do get rid of its ability to utilize violence because of the way that we have slimmed down the military and made more effective counterterrorism operations, which are distinct from the conventional forces that they defend. Jacob was obviously slow, but this argument was explicitly flagged in the 1 ER for like 2 minutes. Now, this is also proven by the 2 ISIS is losing now argument, which they do not have good evidence that they might be losing in Syria and the Middle East, but they shift elsewhere, which just proves that this obviously cannot solve. Now, the line-by-line territory arguments. We're the only ones who are reading new evidence about recent territory gains in other places. The Ignatius 1.5 evidence also sells territory elsewhere, which either proves that the negative counterplan cannot solve because the ISIS will just shift elsewhere and the impacts are inevitable, or that only the plan does because it effectively addresses them. They say that we just drove ISIS out of a stronghold. Obviously, ignores the fact that Brussels and Paris happened, which proves that ISIS still has operational capacity and territory is not key. They say territory is key. Obviously that is not the case. In order for them to acquire nuclear weapons, who cares if they have territory? But they're still losing the territory debate anyways via the conceded 1 AR evidence. They say now the regional fill-in argument, our lane 1.7 or lane evidence from this year is just so much better in this instance. The 1AC evidence indicates that the reason why, even though we have withdrawn from Iraq, that no other group has stepped up and taken the lead to fight ISIS proves that they all offload their security requirements in the United States. The only possibility for regional cooperation in a forum that gets GCC countries together to work together to fight terrorism in the world in which the United States steps back and causes other places to lead in the effective framing issue for this round is just no impact defense on the pivot page. Any risk of the defense on the terror advantage. If you're not sure here, you should just hang your hat on the pivot advantage since it was only 30 seconds of the 2 R. A lot of defense here. Anything else? All right.
Can both sides get a doc together?
Yeah.
Do you just all the cards that were referenced in the 2 AR?
2-1 for the negative. I voted on the turn. I gotta tell you, it pretty clearly seems to be there in the 2AC to me. Like, those cards say more than I ever expected that they would have about North Korea. So I'm giving them a lot of credit for this Korea impact. I think that, number one, that their 2AC evidence says that North Korea is acting provocatively now. It's causing allies to freak out, and that we need to increase our presence and commitment so that we can assuage their fears. They have an argument that says that it's going to cause an arms race in Asia, and then they have a piece of impact evidence that was at no point answered that said there will be a nuclear war in Asia if there is an arms race. So that, to me, sounds like a really fucking bad thing. They could also, so they've got that going on. I think they probably don't need the 1AR cards to win. Like, everything that I would vote on is there in the 2AC, but the 1AR cards also seem like a logical extension of it. I don't think they need this additional terminal impact to win the debate, because they already have a pretty massive one at that point. I think that there's a 100% risk of the affirmative alone solving a nuclear war in Asia through either proliferation, a war with China, or North Korean adventurism, likely some combination of the three. The 2AR was the only speech with any kind of impact calc. The 2NR only said, and ISIS could get a nuke and it would go nuclear. And nuclear terrorism sounds bad, but a 100% uncontested risk of the impact seems way worse. The terrorism, I think you're beating them pretty badly on most of the arguments here. I just think that it outweighs. I'm more comfortable leaving behind a small presence and taking my chances with, spec ops, drones, occasional airstrikes, and a shot at probably a crappy regional alliance solving terrorism. I'm more comfortable with that, and I think that it serves to provide some mitigation of what I think is a smaller impact. So I think that there's at least some contestation of what is a smaller impact. And I think the one weakness of the negative argument is your Ev is way stronger on uniqueness than link turn. I don't think, your evidence is way better on word crushing ISIS now. But it, there's nothing in there to me that's and it's because of the exact force posture we have. And especially when read alongside the half Ev that's historically it's not the massive presence we have in the region that beats terrorists, but it's the other things. And so, I don't know. And then, they kicked the Iran advantage. Even if I didn't think that they kicked it, I don't have any extended impact by the neg there. So I honestly can't see how there's a neg ballot, but there are two other judges that could. So let's hear from them.
Back to you. Silence.
Okay. I don't really disagree with a lot of that. I think that the big problem here is not impact comparison enough in either speech. I think that you basically get lucky on the neg. At least that's how I look at it. I agree with all of the interpretation about the pivot DA, so I'm not going to add anything there, except the one thing I'll add is I think that you all are definitely losing that China has moderated and is making no attempt to challenge the United States because of faith in economic interdependence. I think your evidence doesn't speak to that at all. So I don't think that there's a China risk. I think it's the North Korea scenario, definitely. Maybe China gets involved like the 1AR card says, or maybe not. There's not a specific discussion by you whether or not the negative takeout to the China-US war applies to that. I don't know. So you have a really big risk. The short version of what I ended up deciding is that I think that the turn to the advantage is so absolute and with a larger impact that I voted neg. And I think that that's not something that's said by the 2NR, but a comparison of the impact cards read by y'all that they turn, and a comparison of the impact cards that you all read to turn the pivot DA. I think that the bigger impact is terror. So I can go down specific parts of the terror debate, why I think that they won basically every part of that, but it really just amounts to bigger impact. And so I don't disagree that you all had more impact calculus than the negative, but I don't think that it addressed the level of the comparing the terminal impacts. And so that's why I thought that the negative was a hit.
What was the counter plan, I guess? Just where'd that factor in?
I think that the counter plan definitely solves the terror. I mean, obviously it doesn't solve the pivot. I think that the negative wins that the only type of effective diplomacy is the type where we have leverage over Iran because we have presence. I don't think that the affirmative evidence addresses the necessity for that balance. I think that the negative definitely wins that Iran will get involved, especially. I think that the key element that the AF doesn't address is the specificity of Iran's willingness to cooperate on ISIS, coupled with a couple of cards the NEG has that says small cooperation can expand. The negative's best, or the AF's best argument about this is their weary evidence, which goes on to conclude, as the negative points out, that this is about whether or not the U.S. will be the leader in the main forum, and that they'll easily just push the U.S. to the back burner and not be involved as the main portion, where he says not only that that's fine, but where he says the leverage diplomacy is the only type that works. That's another portion of the article that the negative reads. So I thought that, the counter plan I thought that where Brian saw that there was less argument on the link debate that was good for the negative, I thought that they so dramatically accessed the diplomacy aspect of solving way better than you did that amplified the link argument pretty dramatically. I don't know, what questions do you all have about the way the terror debate shook out?
I don't have any questions about the terror debate because I agree that we were losing it. But what should the 2AR have done in a world in which
all you needed to do for me literally was compare your impact. Why do I believe that the North Korea scenario outweighs terror? If you think you're behind on all these arguments on terror, instead of smashing your face against it for a long time, do the 2AR thing where you just sit in a spot and talk about, look, I have won this argument, and here's all of the ways it fucks up the negative strategy. Here's all of the ways that I can establish a huge impact. They have no answer to this. The best thing they have is some kind of China doesn't want hegemony argument, but we have a card that talks about the way that the nuclear chain and exchange happens in Asia, that will draw China in despite their hegemony. If there's stuff like that to talk to me about what the terminal impact of this is versus the terminal impact of terror, then there's no way I can vote nay. But with it just sitting there, here's my North Korea impact, here's the terror impact that was from the 1AC that the AF is clearly turning. Now I have to make a decision. I could have decided that North Korea was bigger. That could have potentially happened. When I looked at it, I didn't think that was the case. But definitely without the 2AR pushing me, I obviously wound up not concluding that the North Korea was a bigger impact, but I don't think that means that Brian's wrong for concluding that it's a bigger impact. I think that just was a thing that was floating out there.
Yes to that, but I also thought that the block was like pretty clear that the North Korea stuff didn't have a fast time frame, and that they thought that your evidence was not very good about why the pivot was key to deter North Korea or why to stop adventurism. And so when the 2NC says, I'm not sure if your evidence is conclusive that the pivot deters North Korea very well, then I kind of expected that the 1AR would talk about that more. And then you did read an additional card, but then I still am not totally clear about if that evidence is very good or not. I similarly thought the counterplan would definitely solve the terror advantage. The Iran advantage, I kind of agree with Brian that they kicked it, but if they hadn't, you didn't extend an impact to Iran. So whatever to that. I thought, yes, I also have a lot written about why I thought they were winning terror, but if everyone agrees, then maybe I don't need to go over that.
Felt like you should have kicked the counter plan.
Yeah.
Because you're beating them so bad on, beating them so bad on terrorism. You don't need the counter plan.
Yeah.
Conditionality, way too much time.
Yeah.
I think that's he's totally right about that.
You
The
should
time
have-
is the thing that you had to decide there. The reason that you were in danger of losing is because of the time.
Yeah, I strongly agree. We had a miscommunication over like what we were doing on the counter plan, but so it's like pivot